Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted and privileged to welcome a very, very accomplished filmmaker from Chennai, India, Sruti Harihara Subramanian. Shruti, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Shruti is a national award-winning filmmaker and the co-founder of Goli Soda, and we'll speak about both today. Goli Soda is a sustainability store. She made her debut feature film, A Far Afternoon, on Krishan Khanna, who some of you may not know is an amazing artist, and she won an Indian National Film Award. So Shruti, we'll talk about your journey as a filmmaker and Goli Soda today. Let's start with films. What got you started in the film business?
To be honest, even I'm quite surprised I'm a filmmaker because I come from a family that never watched films. I don't even remember going to a theater as a family and watch a film. But I think the turning point for me was during high school. So that was the time when we had to make a decision on what career we need to take. And until then in school, I was besides being a decent student, I'm not saying I was the top student, but I was good enough. I was also very active in all extracurricular activities. So be it singing, dancing, theater, poetry, name it, I'm there. I might not again win the first prize and everything, but I was very active. So when the thought came about what career choice to take, the first, I was hoping to take a science stream because I was a typical, middle class Chennai family who, science made sense, and I loved biology. I loved animals, and I thought I was going to be a research person or be in some forest or a lab. But what kind of hit me was if I get into that stream, and I was looking around the people around me, and they were all equally very creative and good at it, but they all had to give it up and probably even treat it like a hobby and never a career. And that's when I said, oh my God, I can't not be creative. That was something in me. But that was also the time that we started going to watch films in the theater with friends. And I was drawn to that world. And I didn't know at that point what I was going to do in this world, but because films felt like a whole different world. People from a different world was part of it and not us. But when I was drawn into that world, all I knew was I wanted to be part of this world. I don't know how or what I'm going to do, but this is where I want to be.
Amazing. So you decided to give up science, but did you then train formally as a filmmaker?
Yes. So again, because I said, if I had mentioned films at that point to my parents, they would have freaked out, to be honest. And I myself wasn't very clear, or as I said, I had no mentors. I haven't seen anybody around me from the film industry. So I had no clue what I had to do. So I took up a course called visual communication. So that dabbled a bit of all kinds of creative streams like photography, graphic design, and eventually filmmaking. So when I mentioned that course, and thankfully my father was also in advertising for a while, and he still pursues his love for photography. So it felt like a good start for me to discover what I wanted. And at that point, only one institute in Chennai was providing this course in Chennai for women. And it was like a make or break thing. So I just said, okay, if I'm not getting this, I will probably go back to science. But thankfully, I topped the entrance exam and I got into it. And but more than the course, I would say my work experience was my teacher. Because at the age of 19, during the end of my first year in college, I won this pageant, Miss Chennai, and that opened up the world of modeling and advertising for me. So for me, work, and I did dabble a bit of acting for TV shows. I think that was what opened up my world, and that was where my true learning came from. I think work was my teacher.
Very interesting. So before I come to your film A Far Afternoon, you just mentioned to me that, you modeled and you acted. What was the reason you decided to go behind the camera instead of in front of it?
See, for me, life was kind of serendipitous at that point, because again, when the reason why I participated in the pageant itself was kind of serendipitous, because I had gone to the organizers for an internship to work behind the scenes to learn about event management. And then one of the participants dropped off, and they were desperate to complete the number that they had announced at the press. And they said, you should participate. And for me, again, as I said, we came from a very, very normal middle-class family. And I think right now, children are more exposed to this world, or it's more matter of fact. But at that point, it felt, okay, when I used to see the other models come in for their training, it felt like they're different women and we are different, There was a kind of, I don't know, it felt like they were from another planet.
Sure.
And I was nowhere trained, and they came with specific ambitions to do this. And so when I participated, it was more for let me learn something new. I like that challenge. If I feel I don't understand or don't know anything, I like to jump into it and discover it. Wonderful. So it was more into that, and eventually modeling happened. But there was something in me that felt that I needed to do more than just this. I felt my calling was something more. And I was more curious every time I was in front of the camera. I was always curious to know what was happening behind. And then all this was happening during my college times. And when I was done with college, obviously the next step was, what next? Do I pursue studies more? Do I take up a job? And that's when I said, okay, I love working. I love learning on the job, but I want to know more. So let me take up a job as an assistant director. And that's when I went behind the camera.
Wonderful. So let's talk now about your debut feature, Far Afternoon, which won the National Film Award. Tell me what went into making this film, and do share some interesting anecdotes that you must have been confronted with.
So initially, this film was not meant to be a film. It was just an archival project. The Parimal Art Foundation wanted me to come to your city, Gurgaon, and shoot Mr. Krishan painting. And they said he's just set out painting this work, and we most likely will be picking it up for the museum. So it'll be a good archival material. So I set out, and at that point, I had no clue about who he was or his work. Of course, I would have probably heard his name here and there, but I never followed his work, or I didn't know much about him or his work. So I went there with my crew, and as we started shooting the process of him painting, it was very meditative, and it felt that this is more than just an archival project. And when I spoke to him as well, he was full of anecdotes. He was full of stories, and there was so much history to him, because when we started shooting him, he was 89 going on 90, and he was such a charming man. And I said, there is more to this. And I went back to them and said, can I make this as a film? And they said, go ahead, as long as you're within your budget, go ahead and do what you want. And as we worked on the film, initially we thought, okay, this could be something just small that will go up in YouTube, but it had its own life. It grew and it grew, and it became a feature-length documentary. And the rest, they say, is history. I mean, it went to many film festivals. It won 2 national awards. Yes, so it had its life of its own.
Incredible, absolutely. And I can understand what you must have experienced, because in 1978, 79, when the Moria was being built, I had just joined ITC, and he, in a very Michelangelo style, and I'm sure you've seen those paintings.
Yes. It's there in the film. We shot the Moria mural for the film, and he talks a lot about his experience.
I know. I was one young 21-year-old assistant hanging around there, helping whoever could, in those days. But Shruti, coming back now, given the fact that you had such an amazing debut, did that put pressure on future projects?
So the thing is, it was kind of unexpected, because as a filmmaker, one would think after many films that you do, maybe you will win an award at some point, maybe a national award, maybe some other award. But this came totally unexpected. And but it did give me a certain identity among my, not just my fellow filmmakers, but my circle of people around me, because until then I was working hard as an assistant director behind the scenes. And every time somebody asks me, I say I'm a filmmaker. And, I work as an assistant director. And most of the time people don't usually believe me, because they have a sense of this is how a person should look. If I'm carrying myself like this, they don't picture me as a filmmaker. So in fact, after the film, I did have many people who saw the film, who came to me and said, you know what, you kept saying you're a filmmaker. I have to be honest, I didn't quite believe it. I thought it was something that you just randomly say or do, but I didn't know you were such a good filmmaker. So the National Award kind of gave me an identity as a filmmaker, which was essential for me to get my future projects. And one such project was working with one of my all-time, idol, A.R. Rahman. So it gave me the opportunity to be part and create the series called Harmony with A.R. Rahman. And until then, I think there was a little sense of responsibility at that point, but I think the major responsibility for me, it happened only after working with Rahman sir, because working with such a,
icon,
a big icon, and the response that we got, because Afar Afternoon was still screened to a very niche set of audience, but here Harmony was open to all. The public gave its feedback and their reaction to it. So much, especially during the pandemic, that was when most of them actually caught up with the series. And I had really emotional, letters coming in through, various sources about how the series brought them a sense of calm, or they used to say, I couldn't sleep for days and nights, and only when I saw the series, it brought some sense of calmness. And that's when it kind of overwhelmed me to think, oh my God, here I am. I just made a series that was true to my sense and my art, but I didn't know it has the power of an impact like this. So that's when the sense of responsibility came in more and more.
Amazing, amazing. So one more question relating to films before we move to the next segment. What goes into preparation for a new film project?
It's hard to pinpoint that, because I think the minute the seed of an idea gets into your head, the preparation starts.
Okay.
And the minute your product is seen by the audience, it ends, because you can't take it back after that. And that's the thing about a filmmaker. We have no 9-to-5 jobs. There is no work-life balance, because once the idea is in your head, you're constantly working on it. And you might work on some other idea, but probably an idea that came 10 years ago is still festering inside you. So it's hard to, separate the process.
Well said. And how much time would it take from the time you conceive an idea till the time it goes in front of the audience?
So it's again very relative to the project itself and what it entitles. And some of the projects sometimes have very tight deadlines. So no matter what, so it could be a project that technically should take about a year to make, but due to the deadlines, you have to work around the clock and ensure you deliver it within that timeline. So it's very hard to, or there are projects that you think it'll be done in 1 month, but due to, unexpected delays or other factors, it has its own life again. Right. So it's like each one is a different, you might have 5 children, each one is very different.
Well said. So let's now move to your other venture, which is Goli Soda, where you are the co-founder. Tell me about this venture and what was your motivation to put your shoulder to the wheel on this venture?
So I have always been, concerned towards environment and nature. And that was one of my reasons to have taken up science and biology. And I still do have a deep sense of love towards the planet and the animals. In fact, you could say my first step towards sustainability was at the age of 6, where I gave up meat and I gave up wearing silk and leather. And I was always conscious about not carrying a plastic bag, but it stopped till then. And even when I said during my high school, when I had to take that crucial decision of art or science, one thing that I convinced myself at that point to say, okay, I will take up art, but I'll ensure that I continue to do something for the planet at some point. Because if I took up science to do something for the planet, I wasn't sure if I could be creative at that point. So this was my way of convincing myself, and I went ahead to take up art. But even until then, I wasn't very clear what I was going to do. But I think my turning point was in 2012. So I was traveling all around the world for my shoots and other travels. And after a long break, I came back to my city, Chennai. And in front of my house, I saw this overflowing dustbin. And, we are very used to just putting the blame on the government and the municipality and saying, they're not doing their job. But what struck me at that point was, okay, this dustbin is overflowing with the garbage from my house as well. So maybe it should start from me. So I read up a lot. I did a lot of research, and I realized it's not just enough to just stop carrying a plastic bag. There's a lot more in our lives that is not sustainable or creating this garbage. And I took a lot of effort to find unique products that were sustainable. And mind you, at that point, there was hardly any talk about sustainability as there is today. And so much that I discovered something where I could compost at home, which was, it blew my mind, because this was something we read in school about composting, but you would assume it would happen in a forest or in a village. You dig a pit. But here I am, I could do this in an apartment. But I had to travel all the way to Bangalore to pick up that thing. That's when one of my friends said, hey, you know what, even I want this, where can I get it? And my husband was running a cafe at that point, and she was saying, why not sell this out of your cafe? Many of us would come pick it up, because we can't afford to go to Bangalore and pick it up. At the same time, I was also setting up a rooftop garden, because I said, okay, if I have to be sustainable, I want to grow my own food. And again, there wasn't so much talk about growing your own food, and that too on a rooftop. And everybody thought I was mad to do that. And at the same time, we all know you put a seed, you water the plant, and the plant grows. But when you have to grow your vegetable, there was a bit of inertia. So I called a horticulturalist to come over to help me and show me a demo on how to do it. Then again, few of my friends said, you know what, can we also come? Even we want to see how this is done. So that's when I put 2 and 2 together and said, okay, there are still few people like me who are interested to lead a sustainable life. But I had the time and the effort and the privilege to research and hunt for these things. Not everybody can do that. So what if the store next door was selling these products? Then it would help many to have that easy shift to lead a sustainable life. And at the same time, many of us have the right intention to make the shift, but we don't know how to go about it. And that's when we started the store, and we also started doing a lot of free workshops at our store to educate our customers, our audience, and create a community of like-minded people. And that in turn build our customer base, because to be honest, at that point when we started our store, people thought, again, they were mad when I was talking about cloth pads, menstrual pads, or composting at home. They couldn't put 2 and 2 together. Or even when I used words like upcycling, people thought I was mispronouncing it, and they used to correct me, recycling, right? And I said, no, there is a term called upcycling now. So it required people to open their eyes. And we had, in fact, our garden workshop was running for over 5 years consecutively every month, and we were doing it for free. But that built a sense of community. People, like-minded people, came together, and it created a customer base for the products we were selling. And from there, in 2015, we decided to go pan-Indian by setting up our website. And it was also around that time where I felt there were still some products that I needed to lead a sustainable life, but they were not available in the market. And that's when we shifted into manufacturing as well.
Okay. So what is your website? And then tell me a little bit about some of your products.
So our website is called golisodastore.com.
Golisodastore.com. Okay.
Yes, golisodastore.com.
Okay.
So it is a multi-brand platform where we curate sustainable products, and we, mind you, we are very strict in our curation. We ensure, and many people think sustainable is just going plastic-free or going all natural, but we go deeper into that. We look at sustainability in a holistic way, where we also ensure if it's fair trade, if it's locally sourced, if it's ethically sourced, and many such things, plastic free, organic. So we have a whole big checklist of things that we ensure while curating these products. And these products vary from everything: home care, personal care, baby care, a whole variety. Anything for you. That's why our tagline is sustainability every day. Anything that from the time you wake up to the minute you go back to sleep, whatever you require, we ensure we can provide you the most sustainable product to you. And the other thing that we are very particular about is the ease of use of the product. Okay. What I strongly believe from my own experience, or like, I am truly passionate about this. So I am okay with a little discomfort to make that shift. But not everybody would want to do that. So we want to provide products that would help you make that shift, but without a drastic lifestyle shift. So you will pick up, you're not brushing your teeth with a neem stick, but we would give you an option of a bamboo toothbrush where you can brush your teeth. Nice. And with regards to our own brand, Goli Soda products, our own manufactured products, one of our biggest fast selling and our USP product, you could say, is our probiotics range of products. We are the only brand in India providing home and personal care products with the goodness of probiotics. Wow. Where the probiotics, which is active bacteria, is not only good for your skin, but as you wash out this water into the waterways, the active bacteria works on the waterways and cleans up the waterways. So we are not just another natural, organic home care, personal care brand, but our probiotics in it is doing one step more to clean the environment.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I have time for just one more question. And this is to a filmmaker who's conscious of sustainability. Shruti, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want our viewers and listeners to take away from this conversation?
The lesson one of the biggest lessons I continue to learn and I care about is the lesson of being empathetic. I think the bottom line of who we are as humans is the fact that we are empathetic as a being. But I think in the course of how life gets to you, that sometimes gets forgotten. And when I say empathy, it is not just empathy towards one another, but I would say it's also being empathetic towards yourself, because sometimes you forget to take care of yourself. It also is being empathetic towards nature and the other creatures of the planet, because if you look back, probably during pre-industrialization, time, I think most humans live that way. We were not separate from nature. We were part of nature, whether it's our festivities, the way we eat, we are connected to the cycles of nature. But I think in the course of time, we have forgotten that. Right. I think we need to start going back and rediscovering those connections, and that will open up a whole different world.
Well said. Well said. Shruti, on that note, thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you for talking to me about your absolutely incredible journey as a filmmaker. And thank you for talking to me about your experiences on making the film on Krishan Khanna, A Far Afternoon. Thank you also for speaking to me about your passion for sustainability. And I'm certainly going to check out golisodastore.com and see what are the products there. And I'd urge our viewers and listeners to have a look at it as well. But thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.